Hi, I'm Ingrid from Romania.
Hi, I'm Iris from Uruguay.
Hi, I'm doing the KrabbeConnect Cookie Challenge.
Hola, soy Pablo José de Uruguay.
I'm doing the Cookie Challenge for KrabbeConnect.
And we want to help save kids' lives.
Well, just gotta donate.
All right. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Stacy Pike Langenfeld with KrabbeConnect. I'm the president and co-founder and have been in the Krabbe disease industry for 20 years now and was personally impacted by my daughter, Michaela. And I'm going to go ahead and let Anne introduce herself as well as she will introduce Debbie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm Ann Regari, co-founder of KrabbeConnect and vice president. I personally also have been impacted by Krabbe disease for over 34 years with the birth of my son, Nick, and then with my daughter, Gina. So welcome, and I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome Debbie Drell. Debbie is the Director of Membership for the National Organization of Rare Disorders. She oversees NORD's membership programs, which support the collective and individual needs of the rare disease patient organizations, the patients, and patient advocates through education, research, advocacy, and mentorship. Ms. Drell coordinates the participation of over 315 patient organizations and more than 700 executive directors, founders, chief scientific officers, board members, and staff. Ms. Drell has 20 years of leadership in nonprofit public health education, awareness, and advocacy. Most recently, she spent 13 years as the senior director for the Pulmonary Hypertension Association, also a NORD member organization. During that time, she helped to grow the organization's network of support groups from 80 to nearly 300 to develop new services tailored for patients of all ages and to convene the largest gathering of pulmonary hypertension patients in history. Debbie was inspired to enter the field after her sister Alex was diagnosed with pulmonary hypertension. Debbie, on to you.
Thanks so much. Stacy, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. So that's me and my mugshot. And I'm happy to be here in this virtual environment to speak with all of you. Of course, it goes without saying that my heart is in the rare disease community, and I really appreciate Stacy and Ann's invitation for me to present about this patient-focused drug development meeting. Want you all to know I'm a caregiver, I'm a rare advocate, I work at NORD. I also do not represent the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So the disclaimer slide here is the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the individual presenter, me, and should not be attributed to or considered binding on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Thanks. Next slide, please. So people may have different understanding of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and I'm just going to briefly mention that it's a federal agency of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, and it's one of the U.S. federal executive departments, and they're responsible for protecting the public health by ensuring safety and efficacy and security of our drugs, including biological products and medical devices. A patient-focused drug development meeting is something that you may be familiar with or may not. It was part of legislation called PDUFA, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, which was passed by Congress in 1992. And part of this legislation encouraged and created this opportunity for patients to share their experiences with the drug development process in special meetings. That started in 2012, and for 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, the FDA conducted 24 disease-specific, patient-focused drug development meetings. And they did this to systematically obtain patient perspectives on specific diseases and their treatments. We have 7,000 rare diseases. The FDA did 24 meetings. These meetings can serve as a model to target disease areas where there is an identified need. So internal to the FDA, they made the decision of which diseases where they would require patient input, where this would assist them in the drug development. And we know that there's 7,000 rare diseases. We know that there are many different ways to be heard by the FDA, but this is a very special way to be heard. And this is one of the most time-intensive and expensive ways to pull together the patient community, but in a very meaningful way that draws in different stakeholders. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about just what is a patient-focused drug development meeting, what are we doing with this for the Krabbe community, and so back to that 5 years where the FDA was leading them, that was 24 meetings, but they were so successful and so useful, and patient advocates really wanted to engage. If you weren't in that 24, how could you do these meetings? And so they developed a program where they could be led outside of the FDA, and those are called externally led patient-focused drug development meetings. And that means a patient advocate can initiate it and work with the FDA to conduct this kind of meeting. I didn't even talk about what this meeting is, though. This meeting is could be an all-day meeting. It could be across, 4 to 7 hours. I've seen them in person in the FDA and in hotels in and around the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area, because the FDA is based out of Maryland, in White Oak, Maryland, which is near Silver Spring. If you're in the DC area, that's just a suburb. But they've been hosted in hotels. They have been added on to patient conferences, and they've even been hosted outside of the DC area. So there have been a couple of dozen externally led patient-focused drug development meetings, and those meetings involve panels of patients that are pre-selected who have their testimony prepared in advance, where they're sharing their experiences around two specific areas. And one is, what are the most significant symptoms of the disease and the impact on your daily life? So just, how does this disease affect you? The FDA wants to know that. And then the second panel and the second area of interest for the FDA in drug development is, what are your experiences with therapies? What are your experiences with clinical trials? And what are your hopes? What are you willing to risk? And so we know that these are meetings that have taken place historically in person. What's happening during the coronavirus? Did they decide not to have them anymore? So I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. You'll see the stakeholders that are involved in a patient-focused drug development meeting. So whether they're done in person or now under the coronavirus done virtually, it's not just the FDA that's in the room. It's patients and caregivers giving input, and not just patients on a panel that prepare their talks. It's patients that are in the room, live polling. Everybody's, and this can vary depending upon who's hosting it, but what I've seen typically is that they have little, before cell phones, when they were doing this and people didn't have cell phones, or it wasn't universal, they would have like these gadgets where you press a button. So they'd say, if you're in this age group or age category, press A, B, C, or D, and then it would live feed it. Now they have mobile technology and you can use your phones in the room. And so there's live polling happening in the room with the people that are in the room. There's also live streaming, if that's an option. And, these meetings happen differently, but they want to encourage engagement across the country. And sometimes people from around the world participate in this, and they're effectively getting involved by sharing their experience by polling. So there's live polling, there's live streamed Q&A, and there's all sorts of people that are in the room. So it's not just the FDA and it's patients and caregivers, but there are also drug developers. There are also industry, drug manufacturers. Anybody that has a stake in the drug development process are in the room and listening to patients. And this is really influencing, how we see the community and what their needs are. So it is a systematic approach to helping to ensure that our experiences, our perspectives, our needs, our priorities are captured and really meaningfully incorporated into the drug development and evaluation process. So they're hearing directly from patients about what matters most, and this may impact how they look at the drug development process. The FDA, it's regulators, scientists, and researchers. These meetings are really meaningful. They may have never met a patient with your disease, and this is the chance for them to hear exactly what you're experiencing on a daily basis. So like I said, there's two panels. There's a facilitator in the room that is leading the large group discussion. They're actively encouraging people in the room to share and to answer questions. There's interactive webcasts, there's polling, and you can use chats. And that's going to be technology that we've already been testing and seeing in this COVID environment where it can work. In fact, we can get even more people engaged. Now that everything's virtual, you don't have to fly to Washington, D.C. to be in the room to participate. You can do this from your home. So it's just, the pandemic has been terrible in so many ways, but in some ways, it has broken down the boundary or the barrier that we have seen in physically having to travel. Not everybody can travel. We all have families, we're busy, the disease burden, the expense. This is a way that can equalize the participation in these events. So we're really excited about that. Physicians who treat people with Krabbe will be available to participate virtually, drug developers, FDA staff. And this is very helpful for us in that everybody should know what are the benefits and risks that a patient and caregiver, what are you willing to make? And this could help advise drug sponsors on their development of programs and trials around their disease. And so this helps us look at what are the unmet needs in the patient population in the community that aren't being addressed. Are we developing tools that help patients access these treatments? And real awareness and engagement of the patient community and what your needs are. There have been some incredible awareness and discoveries that drug developers had no clue about, of things that you take for granted, that are like, if you're in the community, yeah, of course these things happen, but of course to you, but not to the drug developers. And this could be really critical in how they design treatments and what they're looking for in terms of benefits. Next slide, please. So those are the stakeholders. And I mentioned a little bit about what they will hear in a broad stroke, what you think about drugs and how the disease affects you in your life. I've been to 10 maybe more than 10 patient-focused drug development meetings, including one virtually during the coronavirus. And I'm very blessed that I have been able to participate and observe these meetings, because they're powerful and they're emotional. And people are sharing incredible revelations about how the disease not only impacts them physically, but how does it affect you emotionally? How does it affect your families? How does it affect how you go to school? How do you go to work? What you spend your money on? And what are your hopes and what are you willing to risk? So my sister, like Stacy said, my sister has pulmonary hypertension, and we were one of the first of the 24 that the FDA selected during PDUFA 5 period from 2012 to 2017. Pulmonary hypertension was one that was selected for many reasons, but I was working at the Pulmonary Hypertension Association at the time, and my sister happened to be selected. There were so many patients that wanted to be a speaker on this, and it was like a miracle. I had nothing to do with it, but she did submit her name and was selected to speak. And she told the FDA, my disease caused my divorce. My disease caused undue pressure on my medical bills. She talked about being scared to not see her 3 daughters grow up, that she would die before they graduated high school. She talked about how painful one of her therapies was, that it gave her pain in a port that went into her chest, and how scared she was about drug shortages. One of the drugs that she was on at the time requires electricity and requires her medication to be refrigerated. And what happens if she has a blackout, a shortage of electricity and her refrigerator is down? Like, what is she going to do about her drugs? And these drugs keep her alive. So all of these fears that she has specific to her treatment, all the impact of the disease on her life. A 6-minute walk test is one of the diagnostic measurements for her disease. Like, that doesn't tell her anything. That doesn't tell her if she has energy to take care of her kids. So she was able to really fully share like exactly what she needs. What's important to her in her life is not being able to walk for 6 minutes. And that's what she shared. And other patients and caregivers were able to share their experiences too. So for Krabbe, this is your shot. This is time to really tell your story. And there are so many stories to be told. And we want to make sure that everybody that's speaking, that we pick people who really complement each other and talk about the different elements of how Krabbe affects you. Did it impact your ability or your child's ability to go to school? How? Did it impact your job choices? Did you have to quit your job? Did you have to go part-time to take care of your kid or to take care of yourself? Did it affect your love life? For my sister, she had to have oxygen on, and she had low energy, and she had a line. Her drug was a line in her chest that if it got pulled could be life-threatening. It could be deadly. Like, of course this affected her romantically and intimacy-wise. And it was difficult for people to share about that, but it was really important for them to hear, like, please, can we get a drug that allows me to live my life fully? And so these are kinds of questions that we're asking. Were you involved in clinical trials? What's important for you? What are you willing to risk? Short of a cure, what would you think is an ideal treatment for Krabbe? What are you currently doing to manage your disease? So many questions. And we have an online form where you can fill out and tell us about you, but it's not open-ended. It's open-ended, but it's not just like one question, like, tell us about you. We go through a lot of different questions because there may be things that you haven't even thought about that are of interest to us, for us to really find the right group of speakers. There's lots of patients and caregivers who are living with Krabbe. We want to make sure that when we present this to the FDA, 7,000 rare diseases and 24 patient-focused drug development meetings and a couple dozen more that are externally led, like, I think this is a great opportunity for us. Let's make sure that we bring all the voices together. And so we really need to hear from you. The meetings that happen afterwards are really powerful. And it's, if anybody's going to hear and influence how drugs are developed, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is your last stop. Like, these are the folks that really need to hear. And this is just one of the greatest ways, I think, of sharing your experience. So I have to put a disclaimer that while the FDA is open to participating in these meetings, externally led patient-focused drug development meetings and any resulting products like surveys and reports will not be considered FDA-sponsored or FDA-endorsed. However, the voice of the patient's report, which is the real asset that comes out of these meetings, not only is it FDA in the room hearing and feeling and getting a sense of the overall big picture for Krabbe community and what your risks are and what your wishes are and how it impacts your life. Not only do they get that moment during the patient-focused drug development meeting, but we create this report afterwards and we work with medical writers. We have it reviewed by researchers. This report takes the surveys and the polls that take place during the session. It takes all the testimonies and it boils it down into a nice report that can be shared for the rest of history, for the history of this disease and in drug development. It's a snapshot of time, really capturing the community. And I think it's just an incredible experience and it's an incredible opportunity. And it's very collaborative and a great chance to be heard. And for each person, each individual in the Krabbe community really representing the whole community and sharing what can help us really get the right treatments that make sense for patients that scientists would not normally know of when they're considering drug development. So I'm going to pass it over to Stacy and Anne to talk about what the timeline looks like. Actually, I'm happy to go through this. Sorry about that. So the timeline for what we're working on, it's a lot of work, and I basically just talked about the meeting itself. In January of this year, we sent a letter of intent to the FDA. This is part of the normal process. We heard back in March, and they approved it, and we started the planning process. We were meeting regularly with the FDA staff, and we've invited different stakeholders in the Krabbe community to participate and get involved. And then the coronavirus hit. And so we went back to the FDA, and we talked about what would this look like, and we didn't know. So we had extended the date, and we thought we were still going to do it in person. And then we kept learning more about the coronavirus. Now we have made the decision to go fully virtual. So in April, we postponed it. And then in May, we decided, you know what, we've got to make it virtual. Let's do it in October 29th. That made sense for us, for a time frame for us to be able to do this and pull together the virtual platform. And now we're having this meeting where we're talking to the Krabbe community, and we continue to promote the registration so that you can participate, but also the speakers. That's really something that is special and something that takes all boats to participate and to really make it an effective meeting. So next slide, please, for the continued timeline.
Yeah, I advanced it already, Debbie.
Oh, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
So thank you. So we're looking at the rest of the summer. So August 27th is our deadline for patient selection. So August 27th is when we want you to fill out that online form to let us know that you'd like to be a speaker. And then there is a planning committee that will review the speakers and make determinations based upon how we can get individuals that represent as much as possible a cross-section of the Krabbe community. It won't be perfect. It will never be exactly the Krabbe community because it's so multidimensional, but we'll get as many different voices as we can represented there. And then we'll continue with the preparation with the technology, the online polling, the medical presentations. And in September, when we've selected those speakers, we'll work on coaching and writing the stories and really practicing them and figuring out what are the best messages to include, because there's so much that you can say in your story. And then we'll work on how we'll be moderating it. So there's a lot of back-end logistics in the planning process, because it is, I think it's a 5-hour meeting.
4.
4-hour meeting, apologies, a 4-hour meeting. And then on October 29th, we will be running it live streaming. We'll have the presenters there and the FDA will be there listening, and we will run it. And it will be a really powerful experience for the FDA, for the drug developers, for industry, and for our community, for the Krabbe community to be there together in solidarity, being heard by the FDA. And then we take all that data and behind the scenes, we pull it all together and we create this Voice of the Patients report. We survey the community to see if there's anything else we're missing. And then we transcribe, create the recording, we make it available to everyone, and then we start working on the Voice of the Patients report. And that is typically, and we've done this before with another, NORD has done this before, once before, as the convener and the coordinator with an anemia organization for a disease called pyruvate kinase deficiency. So we've done this before for an in-person meeting, and now we're doing it virtually. And we have already done, converted 2 of our big national conferences into virtual forums. So for us, we're still doing the work and the vetting of platforms and technologies and working with the FDA, but we do have the capacity to do this, and we are very excited, and we know that it will be successful. We just need the patient community and caregivers to come together to find those speakers and to register to participate. So this is your chance, and I now will turn it over to Ann and Stacy for the wrap up.
Debbie, that's such an exciting opportunity for your sister to have been able to actually tell her story. And as Debbie said, that we really, although KrabbeConnect initiated this, we are here together as a community, and NORD has agreed to facilitate it and is well versed in meeting with the FDA, and so appeared to be a perfect fit. And so we just want you to know that this is really your chance to be heard. So we encourage you to register. The meeting would not be impactful without those directly affected by the disease. And the FDA needs to understand the Krabbe disease story, whether that's for transplanted families, untransplanted families, or those just recently screened by newborn screening, and also from families who struggle to get an accurate diagnosis. We also need to hear from patients and caregivers impacted from early onset to late onset. So those living with the disease in the infantile versus those living with the disease in the adult and or teen years. We need to hear those stories. The FDA needs to hear that. And so they need to understand what each day is like for you living with this disease and how it impacts your life. The latest research, clinicians, researchers, and those closely connected to the Krabbe disease space will be tuned in, will be participating, will have discussions around what they're doing in the Krabbe disease space and what is working in the animal models. The gaps in care, this is a great opportunity also for patients and nonprofits to provide insight on the current gaps in care. One of the examples that I like to give are those that live in the rural areas who struggle with the ability to get respite care for their families as they care for those with the disease, and even obtaining genetic testing for patients and siblings to ensure that they have the right information going forward in their family planning. And also the FDA wants to hear from companies such as Passage Bio. They're the ones on here because they're the ones that have publicly announced a commitment to Krabbe disease and how they're going to help develop new therapies and their projected timelines. So here is just kind of an overview on the steps to participate. And this, like I had explained before, NORD has graciously agreed to partner with us on this as they are well versed and have strong ties to the FDA. They are facilitating all the registration pieces and the elements that go on behind the scenes. They will be the ones selecting through their planning committee who will be the speakers from the Krabbe disease community, from the patients and caregivers who will be telling their stories. We would love for everyone to tell their stories, but unfortunately the FDA doesn't have that time, and so they will be selecting the ones that will make the greatest impact for helping developments move forward in this space. And just so you get an idea of who's been invited to participate in this meeting, here's a list. Obviously, the patients and caregivers, there would not be a meeting without these individuals. They are the heart and soul of what we are doing, and we are working diligently to bring them better therapies and hopefully a cure someday. So all the organizations listed here, as well as pharma companies and clinicians and researchers, are all going to be a part of this meeting. I feel like this is the one chance we are all going to come together and work as a team to help move developments forward in the Krabbe disease space. Just wanted to make a note, those who are fiscal sponsors will be recognized by NORD and KrabbeConnect, and they will also be acknowledged in the Voice of the Patient report, which Debbie briefly explained. It's an all-encompassing overview of what Krabbe disease is, how it impacts the family, what the current research is, what are the gaps in care, and where we need to go. And so this will be circulated to all those who have participated. Obviously will be on NORD's website and the FDA's website for those stakeholders involved in moving Krabbe disease forward. As always, we like to provide as much resources for you as the opportunities to learn. And so, as I stated, these slides are going to be sent out to you upon the end of this session. All these links that have the orange highlighted areas, they're clickable links that will lead you to a sample meeting ran by NORD and PK deficiency, as well as an important article on what PFDD meetings do and what they help out with, and then an actual patient voice report, which is done by NORD as well. So a very all-encompassing resources to really help you grasp and understand how much this is going to help the Krabbe disease space. And we couldn't be more excited to have this opportunity. With that, I actually want to turn it over to Ann. Ann recently participated in or listened in on a online hemophilia patient-focused drug development meeting, and she can give a little bit of insights on kind of how the online forum went. Obviously, we wish we could do this in person, but since developments are moving in the space with Krabbe disease, we feel like it's important to do this now versus waiting for the opportunity to do it in person next year. And so, Ann, you want to just say how you thought the online patient-focused drug development meeting went that you participated in?
Yeah, I participated. Thank you, Stacy. I participated in that meeting last week. It was a virtual meeting. It was excellently run. They had a facilitator that introduces the disease. It talks about the disease. They have clinicians that talk about experts in the Krabbe disease field, clinicians that talk about the disease. And then it goes into some of the patient stories that were selected. And it was very heartwarming, and for me to listen to it, even being exposed to having been a Krabbe mom and caregiver for so many years, to hear their patient stories was really moving and very informative in a different disease space. And it felt like you really understood the needs of the community and what the FDA needs to learn about their disease, and what treatments that may be developed need to help their patient community. The polling was really expertly done. I was very impressed that the questions that were asked, the viewers, how they were able to tune in and answer those questions, and then the percentages, there were bar graphs and percentages of how people responded to the questions. It was very, very informative. I was extremely impressed about how NORD was collaborated and connected all of the communities, all the stakeholders, all the families, and was able in a 4-hour time frame, which probably isn't enough time for any of our diseases because they're all so rare, but they they were able in 4 hours to make the FDA or allow the FDA to understand the importance of looking at better treatments for their disease community.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Anne. I just want to open it up for some questions. If the participants have any questions, I would encourage you to go ahead and submit those. I know that all of us are going to be anxiously waiting to hear who is going to be the speakers, what the agenda is going to look like, and how the proceedings are going to go. And as soon as we the registration close, and which is August 7th, you said, Debbie, is the deadline for applying to register.
Deadline. Sorry, that's the August 7th is the deadline for speakers. The event's in October, so you can register all the way up till October.
Yeah, and you can register to attend. So there's two different ways you can participate. You can register to attend, which we will want as many Krabbe families and stakeholders as possible attending, because they will be part of those questions that will be polled during the meeting. And then you can be registered to speak as well. And so those individuals we will reach out, NORD will reach out to at the end of August, once all the applications are in and they've had time to evaluate the applications.
Now, Stacy, if you wouldn't mind making me a co-host, I'd be happy to share a screen of a page from the Voice of the Patients report. I'd love to do that if that's possible while we wait for questions to come in.
I think you can, because you're a panelist. Is it not allowing you to?
Yeah, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. So if you
Okay, do you want me to share that patient voice report that you sent?
Yeah, if you could share the link and then go to page 3.
Okay, give me a second here. I have to stop my share.
No problem. Because it's hard to really understand what a Voice of the Patients report and what this whole meeting is all about if you haven't gone to one.
Right.
And I think in the Voice of the Patients report, that PDF document that we made for pyruvate kinase deficiency, you can really capture, you can really see what the patient-focused drug development meeting, what it looks like. There's images, but it's that third page that has the table of contents where it goes through really what we did at the meeting. So if you go to page 3, we can demonstrate. And so you know, I've seen every Voice of the Patients report. They're usually black and white, and they're usually pretty text. I mean, it's all text, you know, and it's 60 pages of text. And NORD wanted our Voice of the Patients report to be accessible to the public. You know, it is a very important document, and having that text and that data there is really important. But we wanted this to be accessible to the community too. So while the FDA, you know, they don't care if it has graphics, they just want the data. This is also for the community. And so if you look at this, this page here, and I'm not sure if you can magnify it anymore or focus or hone in, this is it. This is basically, you know, what we did in the workshop. So for 4 hours, we have a medical professional talking about the basics of the disease. What is it? What causes it? How is it diagnosed? What are the symptoms? And then we look at the participants' demographics. So during the meeting, we're going to ask, how old are you? Where do you live? When were you diagnosed? We're going to poll. So we're going to know if there's 1,000 people on the web portion, you know, zooming in, you know, who's in the audience. So we ask those questions too. And that's all captured in this report. So it's very interesting to see what does the Krabbe community look like in this snapshot of participants. We ask the panel, you know, what the first panel. So we poll people, then we ask the first panel, and it's a pretty much a very similar structure as to other patient-focused drug development meetings. But the patients give their testimony, and then there's discussion afterwards. So what you share on the first panel about how it impacts your life, people will say, yes, that impacts me in the same way, except it's a little bit different because as a Latina, which is my experience, X, Y, and Z, these are additional concerns. So if the panel does anything, it not only reveals what's going on in an individual's life that could reflect the community, but there may be members in the audience. So audience participation is very important too. And we have a moderator that will solicit all of this kind of feedback virtually. And then we have our second panel, which you'll see page 19 if you're interested, and that we go through the testimonies. Then the audience is engaged. Then we poll people. So we are really getting, that individual perspective. We're getting feedback and response, and then we're getting the collective room, that virtual room statistics, qualitative and quantitative data on clinical trials and risk benefit to new therapies. We had Amish community members, and this was very specific to pyruvate kinase deficiency, and then all of the rest of the materials and information there. So this is real. I'm really excited for the Krabbe community. We've got work to do, but all we ask of you in the room here is register. If you are affected by Krabbe as a caregiver or a patient, and you're comfortable, even if you're not comfortable sharing, let us know if you're interested, and we can help make you comfortable sharing. We can make it so easy for you to tell your story. You're the expert of your disease. Of course, FDA is going to be in the room and researchers, but they don't know your life. Only you know how this disease affects you. And there are lots of people who are in the community who are used to telling their story. We like every voice, people who are shy, people who have never thought about talking to the FDA, put all of those hesitations to the side, because you might be really contributing an incredible experience that the FDA hasn't heard yet. And so we want you to think about that, and we want to help you. We'll help you write your statement. We'll help you practice it, and there won't be any surprises because this is something that we want to help coach you through. And there's a lot of time from here until October. So we want you to speak. We want you to participate and register. We want you to tell your friends and family to register. And if you're involved in a nonprofit organization or industry, we want you to support the effort to promote it. Tell your coworkers, tell your patients, tell your community. This is really the biggest coming together to bring a patient perspective to the FDA. And it's a once in a lifetime opportunity with the FDA in this way, in this very meaningful way.
And I just wanted to add to that. There's a question that we'll get to here just shortly, but I just to all those that are on and joined us today, one, thank you for taking time, and two, everyone matters. KrabbeConnect started this initiative, as I've stated, but we're all in this together, and we're one team working to help those living with the disease live their best life. And so you will want to participate in this to help those who are coming down the pipeline diagnosed with this disease. We want them to have a better life than what they have today. And so this is how we get there, by informing the FDA of what it's like to live with this disease, the issues that we have, and to ensure that when those INDs come across their desk, that they're well informed and understand that what the community wants. And so they're more likely to be informative when they review those INDs. And so the question that was came up is, how many people have registered thus far, and is it open to international participants as well? It is open to international participants as well. We need the perspective of all. I do not know how many are registered. Alexa has that information, Alexa Moore, who's actually doing a lot of the back end piece. Debbie, do you have?
Yeah, I'm not sure at this point.
Okay. Yeah.
We're starting the promotion on it, so.
Yeah. Sorry, I do not have that information. We can get that information though, and send that out. So, and there's no limit on who can participate. Anyone can attend, and be active in the actual event as far as listening in and taking the polling questions and so forth. The only piece that we have limits on is obviously how many speakers we can facilitate during a 4-hour time frame with the FDA. So
I would love to ask the audience to use the Q&A to, if you are diagnosed or are a caregiver to someone diagnosed with Krabbe, if you could put in the question box maybe something about your experience that you think would be interesting to share with the FDA or with the community. You know, how does Krabbe affect you? What are things that are important to you? Or you could use the chat box, but I think this is just, I learned from another rare disease patient-focused drug development meeting that there was a stigma involved in discoloration of their skin. And one woman developed an eating disorder as a result of the bullying that she got from her disease. I had never thought about that. And I have a sister with a rare disease, and she's been bullied for using the handicap spot. And, just the way that a disease affects your life personally is profound, and things that you may take for granted is shocking information for someone who just has never walked in your shoes. And so I'm just curious what people's thoughts are, or, but you don't have to put it in the chat, or you don't have to share. But we are encouraging you to sign up to speak. And if not speak, then register to attend.
Is it clear to you guys how to register and the information that is presented today? We're trying to make it easy to get to the link. It's not actively, it's more like a private web page. So if you went out and searched for it, I'm not so sure that you would be able to find it. But trying to make those links available, and Debbie provided it in the chat link. So
yeah, if you visit NORD's webpage, rarediseases.org, there is a toolbar on the top that says events. And if you go to that, you can go to October and go to that date, and you can find the event listed there. However, I know that KrabbeConnect and other Krabbe groups will be sending emails out about this with the link that it will be hosted on your websites. So it will be available externally. And when we email with the recording to this webinar, we can put the link in there for registration. We can put the link in there for speaking. So this information is discoverable pretty easily. If you search Krabbe and the words and the letters PFDD, this will pull up high because NORD has good SEO. But it's all there, and we'll make it really easy for you. The way that you heard about this webinar, that if you got it on an email, if you saw it on social media, you will continue to hear from KrabbeConnect and other Krabbe groups to register and to participate and attend. This is going to be a historic moment in the community, and a really great opportunity for the FDA to hear your unique experiences, and I'm really excited about that. I hope that you will join us.
So this is the current fiscal sponsors at this time, but there's plenty of time to still participate and be a fiscal sponsor. So the individual to reach out to is Alexa Moore. And if you need any more information on that, I can provide that through an email. Just reach out to me, or probably Debbie has her direct contact information that she can post in the chat. But if you guys don't have any more further questions, I will give you your time back, and we will send out these slides and have this webinar available for download on our website soon. I want to be sure to thank Debbie for taking time today to be with KrabbeConnect and really ensuring that we have a productive and successful patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA. We are inspired by your story of your sister, and we hope to have that opportunity for many families in the Krabbe disease community. So thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for sitting here and learning more about this opportunity. And hopefully we will see you and hear you in October.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you.